Welcome back, everyone. Although I feel like the current subject matter I've been covering on my channel is kind of dark, but it needs to be covered. It really does. I do have some plans for the gothic culture that does subscribe to my channel. I do have some plans for that in store. But I feel like this subject matter, dealing with the pedophiles, is much more important. I don't know how long this video is going to be. It could be quite long. I did a lot of research into this. This is where we're going to cover psychological and physical effects of children that have been exposed sexually by an adult. So, here we go. First of all, what I found when I was doing my research is that, I was right, that there is a lot more psychological and medical research that has been done that shows that sexuality with children causes more harm than you would even think. Well, if you're rational, then no, then you already would know that. It's common sense to me. But basically, OmniPolitics16, Gen, Cartograph, #Heart Progress, you're all, I mean, there's just no evidence. There is no psychological or medical evaluation that has been done that would be cited in your favor. The only people that have any articles in your favor are you people. That's it. That's it. There's just, there is no example out there of anyone that was sexually molested or exposed to sexuality with an adult at a young age to just look back and go, yeah, that was awesome. I really liked it. There is no evidence of that. None. None. But I guess first I would like to say, talk about the ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. And I do have a screenshot. Anyway, the ASCA is about steps to recovery and its long process, and depending on how long the subject has been suppressed, how long the subject has suppressed it, and the severity of the actions taken upon them as children. Each person will often be dealing with several aspects of a stage to varying degrees at any given time. Progress through a stage more often resembles an upward moving spiral rather than a straight line, meaning that this is something that takes a very, very long time to deal with and cope with, and even then, you're not necessarily going to get over the traumatic events that happened to you from your childhood as a product of this. And they go into, at this particular website, they go into the processes of the psychological evaluation and the treatment that psychologists and psychiatrists use, and helping people manage the problems that they deal with as they were sexually abused, touch, whatever. They even go into child abuse. It's all lumped into one category as child abuse, and dealing with it. And they even have some resources where you can get in touch with somebody if you need to do that. The links will be in the description below. Some of the links do actually provide some really helpful resources in getting help, or even if you're your child, you're a parent and you have a child that was subjected to sexual molestation or abuse, and how to cope with that. And there are resources where you can get in touch with psychologists or psychiatric or medical facilities that will help you in dealing with that issue and helping your child cope with that problem. And to go on, there was another site that I visited called Stop It Now. And really, that's the underlying theme. When I was reading into the psychological articles, I did come across a thing where they put pedophiles into two kind of different categories. When I listened to OmniPolitics 16 or Cartograph or Jen, or look at the hashtag Heart Progress thing, these are not people that are like what I was reading from that virtuous pedophile that were saying they know they have a mental illness, they know it's wrong to touch children, and they're trying to do everything in their power to not go out and commit that kind of act. And Stop It Now is a resource center for parents of children that are survivors of sexual abuse. So I would recommend checking out that link if you are a parent and you have a child and you need some resources. There's some great resources out there for you guys. Or even if you're an adult and you've been suppressing it for many, many years and it's affecting your life and your ability to live your life, there are resources, and I will leave all those links in the description below. But the Stop It Now is, like I said, it's about parents dealing with children that had that. So I have a screenshot of Stop It Now, so you know what that looks like. And then there is the NAASCA, the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. And this is where we get into some statistics. And I think this is weird that they put these statistics, but I'm just going to read them for you anyway. The chances of being struck by lightning are 1 in 6.2 million. The chances of dying in a plane crash, 1 in 400,000. Chances of dying in an auto accident are 1 in 19,000. The chances of a child being raped or sexually abused is 1 in 4. That's really depressing. But the primary point of that website is to stop child molestation, stop child abuse, and stop sexually exploiting them. Now, what I was saying about OmniPolitics 16 and the psychological research that I've done, he would fall in a line of an actual predatorial mindset. These are people that are going to use manipulative strategies, to do things like let's have a pea sword fight contest in order to get the person to expose their underdeveloped genitals. They do things like this. They tell you that it's okay, it's not bad, don't tell anybody. There's just all kinds of manipulation strategies that people like that use. When you're talking to somebody that's saying that they know that it is a mental illness and that they support chemical castration to keep them away from children so they don't act upon it because they know that it is psychologically and physically damaging to a child, to which I have found many, many bits and pieces of evidence to support that it is not only psychologically damaging to a child, but it is also physically damaging to a child. Their bodies are not developed for that. Yes, they do play with their genitals, but their bodies are not meant for sexual contact. It's just it's not there. And there's even more at stake than that. I found plenty of psychological evidence to support, too, that, think about this as an adult. When you establish a bond with, like a pair bonding situation with an adult, breaking up, abandonment from that relationship can cause extreme emotional turmoil for a while. Actually, it's noted in men, psychologically, men do not show as much emotional strife after a breakup as females do. Females tend to express it very vividly for a very short period of time. Males tend to not express it much at all, but they experience it over a longer duration of time. And that's for adults. Now, children, I don't think they can think in the realm of these concepts. You think about like a child, like and the things that they are really concerned about. They get emotionally stressed over whether or not they can have a candy bar or not. Their concern is whether or not they get to go to the nearest amusement park. And if you tell them no, that's stressful. I don't think it's appropriate for a 7-year-old to be worrying about if their 27-year-old boyfriend or girlfriend might be having an affair with them with another 7-year-old. That's a little bizarre when they're already, they can't even handle being told no, they can't have a toy. And so these people, the Omnipolitics 16, Jenny Lover in my fucking comments, don't think I haven't forgotten about you, and Cartograph, hashtag Heart Progress. Is this something that you really think a child is capable of? You say that everything's okay, that it's fine, that it's just a social stigma. Well, it's not looking that way. It's looking, and there's even more evidence. I'll get into that in a moment, but let's go on to some more websites like RAINN, RAINN, Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. This is another group that you can go to. But some statistics that they have available is 1 in 9 girls and 1 in 53 boys under the age of 18 experience sexual abuse or assault at the hands of an adult. 82% of all victims under 18 are female. Females ages 16 to 19 are four times more likely than the general population to be victims of rape, attempted rape, or sexual assault. The effects of child sexual abuse can be long-lasting and affect the victim's mental health. Victims are more likely than non-victims to experience the following mental health changes. About 4 times more likely to develop symptoms of drug abuse. About 4 times more likely to experience PTSD as adults. About 3 times more likely to experience major depressive episodes as adults. And I wanted to go into the National Center for Victims of Crime, Effects of Child Sexual Abuse on Victims. And I have about 4 screenshots for this. So, 1, in short term, up to 2 years, victims may exhibit regressive behaviors, e.g. thumb-sucking and bedwetting in younger children, sleep disturbances, eating problems, behavior and or performance problems at school, and unwillingness to participate in school social activities. Long-term effects may be wide-ranging to include anxiety-related self-destructive behaviors such as alcoholism and drug abuse, anxiety attacks, and insomnia. Victims may show fear and anxiety in response to people who share characteristics of the abuser, i.e. the same sex as the abuser or similar physical characteristics. Victims may experience difficulties in adult relationships and adult sexual functioning. Survivors may feel angry at the abuser, at adults who failed to protect them, and at themselves for not having been able to stop the abuse. Victims may experience traumatic sexualization or the shaping of their sexuality in developmentally inappropriate and interpersonally dysfunctional ways. Victims may feel betrayed and an inability to trust adults because someone they depend on has caused them great harm and failed to protect them. Victims may feel powerless because the abuse has repeatedly violated their body space and acted against their will through coercion and manipulation. Abusers may cause victims to feel stigmatized, shamed, bad, or deviant, and responsible for the molestation. Victims of child sexual abuse have higher rates of re-victimization, later sexual assaults than non-victims. I also found a thing about men being sexually abused. I thought this was a great example because the stigma behind males is that it's hard to rape, like especially in the feminist community. They brought this up so many times that you can't rape a male because they like it. They want it. It is part of being a male. We like sex. Well, females like sex too. But when you're prepubescent, nope. It's not like that. And I have a video clip of a guy talking about that right here.
We know, and we've known probably for about 20 years, that about 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused as children. And it's a figure that I think is startling to a lot of people, because I think a lot of people think of sexual abuse as something that really applies mainly to women, to young girls, but actually somewhere in the neighborhood of about 15-16% of boys are also sexually abused as children. And I think what we sometimes forget is that we think of men as men, and there's an overlay of masculinity and all kinds of sort of a cultural overlay over that, and it's hard to think of men as victims. But
so anyway, and I got a list of physical and mental side effects of this type of thing, of dealing with sexual abuse. We'll get into that in a minute. I'm sorry, I had to make notes on this one. There was just so much to cover. I read a lot of articles. But when we talk about the ability of, apparently, the law is even considering teenage years not being mentally developed enough to make a decision to even have sex with somebody their own age, even if in that state it's the legal age of consent. The law tends to try and be very understanding of situations. For instance, you're in high school, you're a senior and you're 18, but you're dating a 17-year-old. A lot of the times the law will look at that situation and kind of weigh that, like, well, yes, technically at 18 and their partner is 17, technically that's statutory, but that's only 1 year's difference. They're really close in age. They're still technically teenagers, so fuck it. That's different. But again, I would reiterate, if you take it to like a 30-year-old level or something like that, yeah, a 30-year-old, 30-something, 40-year-old even can, at 18 you can have sex with anybody over the age of 18 that you want. But I would question mentally and just intellectually and emotionally, what would somebody that's 40, 50 years old have in common with an 18-year-old? But sex sells, so that happens. People, there are Anna Nicole Smiths out there. There are gold diggers. But I read a psychological PDF file where they were talking about, can somebody younger be able to consent? Well, the psychological studies say that even though the child is saying yes, and even though the child is apparently giving consent, it does not necessarily mean that they know what they're consenting to. They don't know what it is that you're doing. The part of the brain has not developed yet that tells them what sexuality is. They haven't even developed proper social skills yet. There's just so much developmental stages that go through in a child's development that makes this completely unrealistic. Pushing the narrative of wanting to legalize sex acts with children because you're a pedosexual, which isn't a thing, because pedophiles can be homosexual, bisexual, or heterosexual, that's almost like non-binary nonsense. You're almost essentially saying that you want to have a sexual orientation inside of a sexual orientation. That doesn't make sense. I'm sure you'll try to make a way to you'll try and argue that it does, but it doesn't. It doesn't make sense. It's not a sexual orientation. It isn't. In the world of fetish, that's not a sexual orientation if you like to be whipped. It's a fetish. We're not going to call pedophilia a fetish because you're dealing with a person. And not only that, you're dealing with the aspects of psychological and physical harm. So that's a completely different road. It's a completely different idea. Children are just not meant for it. And I've seen a lot of arguments, a lot of really good points in this of, like looking back in life and knowing that I was a homosexual because I crushed on other boys, not sexualized, but crushed. And you can't do that as a pedophile. And then, there was another example where it's like, well, what happens if it's about love? Well, what if they reach that point where they're no longer in that age bracket? Then you just kick them to the curb. If you're one of the pedophiles out there that acknowledges that it is a mental illness, it makes me uncomfortable that pedophiles are able to come out and proclaim that they are pedophiles. But I suppose it's a good thing that you're able to come out and say, I'm a pedophile. And at least make people aware that that's what you are. And that you take the necessary precautions not to ever act upon it. But these people, Omnipolitics 16, Jen Lover, my comments, and Cartograph and the hashtag Heart Progress people, they're pushing a narrative to legalize it. And there's all this evidence to show there is no reason to legalize that. And some of the arguments I've seen on that side of the coin, I stumbled upon a forum of somebody that was advocating for pedophilia, and I saw some of the logic that was being used there of that if we as adults suffer emotional turmoil over a breakup, why should we not expect the same for children? Because children feel emotional turmoil when you tell them they can't have a candy bar. How much worse would... think about what a child goes through with separation of parents, or when they're taken away from their parents and put into foster care. The amount of suffrage that comes along with that mentally is extreme, just that in and of itself. Adults are more equipped and capable of dealing with these matters because we have a more developed brain. There's even, you can even see successive stages in a child's development of their mental capacity when we look at lying. And the types of lying that certain ages will do, it gradually progresses to get worse and worse as they're capable of manipulating and stuff like that. And there's a TED Talks episode where they talk about that called lie spotting. They talk about that a little bit in there. But in the two different categories of pedophiles, there's the ones that don't act, that have this affliction where they are attracted to young children. And then there's the predators. These are the people that like the ability to dominate something weaker than themselves, or the inability to relate to somebody their own age. I would be willing to bet that Omnipolitics 16 and Jen and Cartograph are completely capable of romantically identifying with somebody their own age based on the things that they've said. I don't know that, but I have a feeling they can. The way that they talk about it, it's almost like, well, I think they fall into that predatorial category. It's that domineering factor. Really, an adult can completely dominate a child. They as it was said, and I hate to quote this because it seems kind of lame, but in The Crow, the mom was a drug user and she was addicted to morphine and kind of prostituting herself, and Eric Draven went up to her and squeezed the morphine out of her arm and made her look in the mirror, and he said, "Mother is the word for God on the lips and hearts of all children." And then goes into telling her that her daughter is out on the streets waiting for her. Now, of course, the daughter was teenage, but it's the same. Children look to adults for guidance, for protection, and that's an evolutionary thing. We look at a mama cat protecting its babies. I really do feel like I am explaining common sense. I don't think I should have to do this, but Omnipolitics 16, Jen, Cartograph, and #HeartProgress is out there. And what really blows my mind is going to their channels, looking at the amount of views, the like to dislike ratio is disproportionate in my mind. It's disturbing to think that there's that many people who are okay with this. I don't think there's anything okay about it. And through all the research and looking through that I've done of all these psychological reports, I could not find a single one. Not a single one. Where somebody had been through this kind of situation and said yes, they enjoyed this. And actually every single example I found of it ends bad. There's a whole plethora of people out there that have psychological turmoil and suffered physical problems because of this. Another thing that I wanted to mention was why they don't always talk about it. Why don't they always come out and say that they were victims? Sometimes it has to do with family loyalty. There's a large percentage of this that happens within the family, or somebody that the family knows, or a boyfriend of the mother or girlfriend of the father, or something like that. Another thing that I also realized is that the Catholic Church uses there have been multiple cases of this where people in the Catholic Church have used the manipulation tactic of religion, that it's God's will. And religious people are very, very superstitious. If you're doing something in God's will, it's hard to perceive it as wrong. And even that being said, so they're doing it under the guise that this is God's will. And many of them have turned atheists because of this. The immoral, corruptive nature of the Catholic Church. There are people that are still trying to sue the Vatican in their adult lives because they were sexually molested under the guise that it was God's will. Yes, there are lawyers that are taking it up. They are trying to sue the Vatican because these people were molested by clergy members of the Catholic Church, and the Vatican has taken them, refused to extradite, and covered it up. And there are lawsuits out there against them for it. They're trying to press legal actions, but it's hard because they're kind of considered their own sanctioned thing. So think about that. You say that, like Omnipolitics 16 Jen Cartograph, they say, Jenny Lover, they say we need to teach the children about sex, that it's just a social stigma. But when you're doing it under God's will, as a religious person, an altar boy or whatever have you, to me that says that won't work. I think we will be living in a society of just deeply damaged people. Psychologically damaged. You'll make my work cut out as a goth, honestly, because that's the whole thing, is looking at how twisted and tormented the world around us is, because human beings just can't seem to do the right fucking thing, even though it just seems so fucking easy. Granted, there's some things that you'll never be able to fix, like heartbreak. You can't fix it. You can't. It's human nature. So think about that. Under the guise that it's okay because God said so, and they grow up and then they say, no, fuck God. God is evil. God allowed me to be molested. And then they go and they try and sue the Catholic Church. The Vatican. They're trying to sue the Vatican. There's multiple people doing this. Multiple. It's not just one. It's multiple. Multiple lawyers, too, that are involved in that. They're making small steps and strides in the progress of this, but that is a thing. It is happening. Now, I would like to go over a list of symptoms and side effects of sexual exposure at childhood, which include, and here's the screenshot, withdrawal and mistrust of adults, suicidal tendencies, difficulty relating to others except in sexual or seductive ways, unusual interest in or avoidance of all things sexual or physical, sleep problems, nightmares, fears of going to bed, frequent accidents of self-injurious behaviors, refusal to go to school or to the doctor or home, secretiveness or unusual aggressiveness, sexual components to drawings and games, neurotic reactions, obsessions, compulsions, phobias, habit disorders, biting, rocking, unusual sexual knowledge or behavior, prostitution, forcing sexual acts on other children, extreme fear of being touched, unwillingness to submit to physical examination, anxiety, depression, disassociation, difficulty concentrating, academic problems in school-aged children and adolescents, withdrawn and or difficulty connecting with others, flashback, increased hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping, bruises, welts or swelling, sprains or fractures, burns, lacerations or abrasions, difficulty in walking or sitting, torn or stained or bloody clothing, pain or itching in the genital area, bruises or bleeding in the external genital area, sexually transmitted infections or diseases, lack of adequate supervision, nutrition or shelter, poor hygiene, inappropriate dress, use of alcohol or other drugs, suicidal thoughts or behavior, flashbacks, and invasive thoughts, nightmares and insomnia, anger, anxiety and fear, depression, mood swings, mental health difficulties, self-blame, difficult feelings of guilt, shame, or humiliation, numbness, sense of loss, grief, helplessness, isolation and alienation, low self-esteem, self-doubt, diminished self-belief, difficulties with relationship and intimacies, problems related to masculinity and gender identity, pressure to prove their manhood, this goes for the males, physically by becoming bigger, stronger, and meaner, by engaging in dangerous or violent behavior, sexually by having multiple female sexual partners, by always appearing up for it and sexually in control, confusion over gender and sexual identity, sense of being inadequate as a man, sense of lost power, control, and confidence in relation to manhood, problems with closeness and intimacy, sexual problems, fear that the sexual abuse has caused or will cause him to become homosexual or gay, homophobia, fear or intolerance of any form of homosexuality, questions and difficulties related to sexuality. That list was comprised of multiple different sites that I have seen. So that's why it's a very long list. Some, like the latter half of it was actually pertaining to male sexual abuse in particular. So why Omnipolitics 16 are you thinking that this is okay? Why are you thinking this is okay, Jenny Lover? Cartograph, hashtag heart progress. Why are people flocking to you? It's disturbing nonetheless. And like I said in the previous video, there is a plethora of evidence to support that pedophilia is not okay. Committing a sex act on a child is extremely harmful to their physical well-being and their mental well-being. I have demonstrated that. There is just a plethora of medical and psychological evidence. A plethora of it. Even in the instance where they are manipulated, that it's okay. Where you take out that concept that is just a societal construct. It's not. It affects them horribly. There was a lot to go in on this. Now, I'm sorry it's such a long video. I didn't even cover all of it. This is only a fraction of what I read. That should just speak for itself. To all those that go out there and watch Jen and Omnipolitics 16 and subscribe to the hashtag Heart Progress and Cartograph, listen to me, please. If you have thoughts, sexual thoughts or tendencies towards children, seek help. Help is available. Don't listen to OmniPolitics 16, Gen, or Cartograph. They are sexual predators. They're not the run-of-the-mill. They're actual predators that are advocating for it. A child does not have, it's been proven, it's been shown in psychological tests, children do not have the ability to consent to sex. They have no clue what you're asking of them. And they don't know until it's too late. That being said, like, share, subscribe, comment, hit the bell button on any channel that you're subscribed to so you don't get unsubscribed. Hopefully I will have some goth-oriented videos, especially after covering this nasty mess. I just felt that it needed to be done. I felt very strongly that Gen needs to stop. OmniPolitics 16 needs to stop. Cartograph needs to never make a video again. Hashtag Heart Progress should be a desolate wasteland of nothing, just in a hollow, empty viscera where nobody goes there. I would like to see that. And I would recommend getting in touch with people that support, if you do have pedophilic tendencies, if you do have that mental illness, seeking out help, getting psychotherapy, getting medications, and don't feel ashamed of that. I myself have been through psychotherapy for bipolar type 2 and panic and anxiety disorder, so don't be ashamed in it. Get help. But for fuck's sake, do not touch a child. Don't do it. For fuck's sake, let them have their goddamn innocence. Without a mouth.